So the debate surrounding Yasuke continues. There's been some reports that the chap who wrote the sort of book that everything has been based on and the Wikipedias and things, some reports that he just basically faked it all and made it all up and edited Wikipedia articles and all this kind of stuff. That's definitely strong. There's definitely a strong argument for that being completely true. However, to add to that, Japanese historian Yuichi Goza speculates Yasuke was basically just an entertainer. Yeah, he was a bodyguard. Yeah, but he was kept around as an entertainer. And he was not a samurai as depicted in Assassin's Creed Shadows. I mean, Assassin's Creed Shadows obviously clearly just complete nonsense. But this is something which the Western, I don't even know what to call them, Western woke elites, I guess, whatever, are trying to do historical revisionism in Japan. And this is a figure that they're really trying to push. So it's good that Japanese people are pushing back on it. Because if there's any particular culture that doesn't, mess around with their own culture, it's the Japanese. They're this is our culture, this is what we do, and we're on it. Like, they appreciate and they value their own culture. So it's good that they're pushing back on it, because how do you argue that? I mean, obviously people they'll argue against it, but it kind of falls flat at that stage. So let's take a look, right? So Japanese historian Yuichi Goja speculates that Yasuke was not a samurai, as video game developer Ubisoft has claimed, and also loads of other people, but rather was just Oda Nobunaga's bodyguard and entertainer. So Goza, who is a faculty member of the International Research Center for Japanese Studies, so not small time, he's around, focusing on Japanese medieval history as well, and also an author of What is a Samurai? So an authority, I would say, was asked, quote, what kind of person was Yasuke? And was he a samurai or not? And here's the response. There are very few historical records of Yasuke, so it is difficult to say, which is true. The history of Yasuke has not been the subject of much research, in part because the history of personalities is not the mainstream of historical studies. In the 15-volume Nobunaga Koki in the collection of the Sonkei Kaku Bunko, which is, I'm butchering all this, which is one of the biographies of Nobunaga, one of the biographies of Nobunaga Koki, a chronicle of Nobunaga's life. There is a description of Nobunaga giving Yasuke a sword and a house, indicating that he treated him as a samurai. However, this is something that only appears in this biography among the dozens of manuscripts of the Nobunaga Chronicle, and we cannot deny the possibility that it was added later when the manuscript was transcribed. Also, even if he was a samurai, he may have been a formality. For example, in the Edo period, feudal lords who were fond of sumos had their own personal wrestlers. Formerly, they were treated as vassals or samurai and allowed to wear a sword, but even if a war broke out, it was not expected that the feudal lords would allow their retainers to fight on the battlefield. So it's like favoritism, like, oh, I like you, so you get to do this, but only in appearance only, sort of thing. I think that's a good way to describe it. So when asked about the magnificent armor that Ubisoft depicts Yasuke wearing in Assassin's Creed Shadows and what position he actually held under Nobunaga, Goza responded, the Japanese people around Nobunaga were very surprised by Yasuke's dark skin and seemed to be interested in it. In a sense, it was a show, and having a black man like Yasuke so close to him would attract attention. In a sense, show off Nobunaga's power. In a sense, Nobunaga could show off his power. Therefore, I believe that the most important purpose was to show off to everyone. In the Jesuit historical records, it is written that Yasuke was powerful and could do a few tricks. I believe that he was, in fact, Nobunaga's bodyguard and entertainer. He was not the samurai warrior that Westerners imagine him to be, slaying one enemy after another. Even if he did fight, he did not command his men. but worked as a single combatant. So basically, the Japanese are laughing at us.
Mm.
So they're like, what the hell are the West doing? You absolute bunch of idiots. So we just, I mean, just a bloody laughing stock. So he was asked a little bit about this petition, which is, I mean, it's not going to do anything, but it still was fun that they set this up, you know. But Japanese people like Ubisoft cancel this bag of shit. It says, I understand that many people think that if you want to respect the samurai culture, the main character should be a Japanese samurai, especially since the story is based on a real person. It'd be more natural to have a famous swordsman, samurai such as Miyamoto Musashi, as the main character, rather than a black man named Yasuke or Yasuke, whose actual character is not known. If Yasuke, who may or may not have been a samurai, is made to be a representative of the samurai, it'd be like taking something away from the Japanese samurai culture. Therefore, I think it is natural that some Japanese and foreign people would react with discomfort and dissatisfaction when they hear the word cultural theft being used in the film.
Mm.
Even if Yasuke were to appear in the game, it should have been in the form of a Japanese samurai as the main character and Yasuke as well. There you go. I mean, there's some other bits and pieces here, but that's basically it. I just think it's interesting. So, what do we think?
Well, I mean, now that we're seeing actual scholars weigh in, my thought is we knew this was what was going on. We knew they were trying to culturally appropriate history from the Japanese to place somebody there that was nothing more than a oddity of the time. Because again, as Bo will tell us all, Japan, up until very recently, and even now it could be argued, is very xenophobic or monoculture or ethnocentric. Let's be kind and say ethnocentric. But at the point in time that this was going on, and we've said this many times, most likely foreigners were eliminated. They were not, brought around. Now they were there with missionaries, but again, that's probably the only reason that there wasn't trouble. I don't know. What do you think? Am I wrong, Bo? All I know is this: now that they're bringing in scholars to disprove the guy that just wanted to sell his book. I mean, here we are.
This is sort of something that's a little bit in my wheelhouse. And when I think it was the first or maybe the second time I was ever on here, Nate, we talked about this. And I said it then, and nothing has changed. The first line that guy said, if you scroll back up, the very, very first line, he says something like, there's very, very little evidence about him. Right. And so that's the bottom line. Now, you talk about revisionism. Yeah. You've got sort of real academics, real scholars, real historians who are actively trying to get to the objective historical truth. Okay, now it's impossible to get to a truly objective historical truth. All history will be a narrative. Okay, so it's just a question of how close you can get to that and whether you're actually trying to reach the truth or not. And then you've got people who are essentially activist historians, just like you've got people pretending to be producers and directors in Hollywood who are in fact just activists. You get exactly the same thing in the field of history. And so, again, my background is ancient history or classical civilizations. And what that often boils down to is that you've got very, very little amount of historical record, literary historical record, just as in the case with this Yasuke character. So, for example, I've been on a stream on Sundays with a small channel called Outcast Creative. Check them out; it's good. At the moment, we're talking about that old 2010 series of Spartacus, and what I'm bringing to the table is my sort of historical knowledge, where I know about the Third Servile War and the end of the Roman Republic and the actual real history of Spartacus. And there's very little, right? There's very, very little. So just an example in that they'll mention one tiny aspect of Spartacus or his life. And then it's just been exaggerated and blown out of all proportion in novels and films and TV. There's that movie Spartacus, with Kirk Douglas from the 60s, Tony Curtis stuff. It's exactly the same here. Often in ancient history, or even medieval history, you've got often one tiny detail about something. Springs to mind that Edward the Confessor is talked about as being extremely pale. And some people say, oh, he was an albino. There's no evidence he was an actual albino. They say, oh, he's an albino. And on the Bayeux Tapestry, he appears completely white. The man was an albino. You don't know that. You don't know that. But that's what activist historians or armchair historians or just sort of non-serious academics, that's exactly the sort of thing they do. And you throw on top of that, if they've got an actual book to sell, or they've got an actual political angle that they're selling, in this case, sort of pro-black propaganda, and yeah, they're happy to just distort history out of all recognition. And so that's obviously what's happened here, because the bottom line is there's very, very little evidence about this Yasuke one way or another, and you can't get away from that, right? And so shills are going to shill, liars are going to lie, and I'm just glad that the Japanese won't have it
based.
So yeah, it's based.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it mirrors what happened with Black Cleopatra and the Egyptians, because they were like, sorry, what? Yeah. Netflix, what are you doing?
She was a Ptolemy. She was a Macedonian of Macedonian descent. So she wasn't even sort of North African Berber or like an Arabian East African admixture. No, she was Greek looking. So certainly not sub-Saharan black. But there you go. But they're happy. These activists pretending to be historians are happy to distort history. They don't care. They don't care about how the Egyptians or the Japanese feel about it. It's not important to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go to the store, especially like around Christmas time, at least here in the States, I don't know how it is over there in the UK, Nate, and Bo, but we have Black Jesus, Black Santa Claus.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. All the time, every year now.
Okay.
So it's just, everybody's got to make sure whatever character or God that you worship or whatever, it's got to represent you also,
Yeah.
Easter bunnies.
You
can't just have culture. God, whatever.
No, did you ever see the Louis Theroux episode when he met the in New York the black Israelites? Did you ever see that one?
Yeah.
Where they're saying no, Churchill was black, George Washington was black.
Legitimately insane.
Yeah, yes, yeah. They're not historians. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, Ubisoft. I guarantee you, Ubisoft saw this one story here on this thing and was like, "Oh, here's our doorway. This is what we can use to push this this DEI and inclusion and stuff into our game. We can use this,
But yeah, well, they have a problem with the Black Jesus thing, but that's not really the point. But they also engaged like this freak show that wants everybody to have interactions with everybody else, for this game as well. Trying to push forward some very uncomfortable things that are similar to being very well kept, and I'm not saying the word. To aggressively hairbrushing, but they brought in these people to tell their narrative story, and that's why, again, Ubisoft is a client of SBI. So you bring in a group like those tool bags, and you're going to have compromised everything. So there's that.
I just think it's just so sad. Like, just let people, when I go to Japan, I want to see Japanese people, right? Like, when I go to certain locations, I want to be surrounded by their culture and their people.
Are you fetishizing?
I go to London, I don't see English people in London. It's just pathetic. It's sad. This constant global grey blob that they want everyone to become. It's just sad. Erosion of culture. You know.
Yeah,
should
I
be killed.
saw everything going on in London. It's like freaking disaster over there.
No, it's not London. It's all the other cities. The most deprived
is it?
areas that are kicking off. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you're
Anyway, there you
comparing
go.
each other
What an
with
absolute-
actual unrest or just the demographic, in which case you're both right.
Oh,
Yeah.
true.
The unrest, all the unrest stuff is
right.
what
Alright.
I'm seeing.
I'm
Yeah,
pretty
not-
unrested right now. I just I'm tired of this. I think everybody is, and I think the only way to escape it is to not buy it. So do not buy this game. Don't buy any game from Ubisoft until they clean up their act. In fact, practice your your financial errorism that you're going to be accused of for not buying these diverse
Just
things.
Be discerning about where you spend your money.
Yeah,
basically.
please.
Anyway, there you go.
And this is one of the worst gaming developers out there
Now.
outside of EA.
Now.
They have been for a long time. I mean, they're the game studio that said, you're not gonna own your games, and you're gonna like it.
Yes, they did say that.
I don't like them saying that.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Well, there we go. Let's
I blame
move
Bo,
on.
actually. I think it's Bo's fault.
I take full responsibility.